Welcome to Journey into Python. So, you want to know what the fastest way to run Python code is? Well, it's super easy. Just open your browser and Google Colab. Yep, that's it. So, let's go ahead and do this. We are going to open a browser. We're going to Google Colab. Open that up, and what we have here is our Google Colab, which stands for Collaboratory. We can talk about the Welcome to Python or Welcome to Collaboratory later. Let's go ahead and start a new Python notebook. And we go ahead and type print hello world and hit Control Enter. And our print hello world is running. The first run is a little slow, but after that, it speeds up quite a bit. And we can hit Shift Enter to start a new one. Just type hello again. All right, so you now can run Python. Not only that, you can run it in nothing but a browser, which means you can run this on your Chromebook. You could probably even run this from your phone. Haven't tried, but I'll have to try and let you guys know how that works out. Now, if you want to go ahead and get started and start Pythoning, go for it. However, if you'd like to stick around and figure out what you can do with Python, specifically Colab, stick around and we will talk about what you can do with Google Colab. So you decided to stick around. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Google Colab and its various features. So one of the first things you might ask yourself is why Colab? Mainly it's easy, fast, free. I don't know if you've heard anything about Jupyter Notebooks. Pretty big deal. It's a very popular data science tool, primarily because they've got data visualization, data imports, and pandas is a big one, which all of those are all separate posts. So if you are interested in that, let me know. Put some comments in below on what you'd like me to talk about, and we'll see if we can get that. It's got lots of features, so various shortcuts, the ability to install third-party packages, so you're not limited to just what it has. I don't know if you've seen some of these various websites that have kind of these built-in little web IDEs, but a lot of times you're limited to what packages they have installed, and if they don't have it installed, then you don't have it. Here you can install anything with pip. So you get access to pip, you run a pip command, install your packages, so you have access to pretty much anything you want. One of the big things that is nice about Google Colab is that it's visualization. Keep in mind, though, that I haven't mentioned this yet, but Google Colab is built on top of Jupyter Notebooks. So the same features that you have in Jupyter Notebooks, you'll have in Google Colab for the most part. So yeah, it's an interactive data science and scientific computing across all languages. It didn't just start for Python. It started out with Julia, Python R. That's kind of where the name came from, Jupyter. It's a web-based development environment, which is really its success story because it allows you to write Python just via web browser. That's all you need. It's supported in the cloud environment, so you can run this in AWS, you can run it in Google Cloud, which that's what Google is doing, is they're essentially running their versions of Jupyter Notebooks inside Google Cloud. I'm sure Azure has it. What's also nice about it is that the notebooks can be converted to standardized outputs. So you can convert them to HTML, LaTeX, PDF, RST, Markdown, Python, so forth. Not only can you export them, but you can inside, and we're going to talk about this, each of the cells supports Markdown, and it even supports HTML. So you can actually write HTML inside the cells. And that's kind of really why it makes such a great data science tool, because you can, tell a story, provide the code, and provide the visualizations. So Very important. What's also really nice too is you can connect to multiple kernels. So you can have one kernel with, say, Project A's packages, and then you can have another kernel with Project B, and so forth. It does support debugging, so it's very nice. Tons of useful shortcuts. We're going to get into these a little bit more later, but the primary one is Shift Enter, Control Enter. We'll run the cells. So let's go ahead and demo that. Right now, if we hit Shift Enter, it will actually go a cell below. Control Enter will just run the cell and stay within that cell. Those are the ones that I use constantly. So those one of the big shortcuts. Google Colab also supports useful shortcuts. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and go over these inside Google Colab. So let's go ahead and get our way into our Jupyter Notebook. So I'm in this cell. If we hit Shift Enter on the cell, it will go ahead and print out the hello again, and then it goes to and creates a new cell below it. If there is a cell already below it, when you hit Shift Enter, it will just go to the next one below. So it kind of does a either or. It creates a new cell or just moves down to the next one. One thing also to note about these cells as well is that all your variables carry over because it's a single kernel that these are being ran against. So let's go ahead and hit Shift Enter there. A equals 1. So now if we do print A on a then cell below it, we'll still get that 1 there. So your variables carry over, which allows you to, test and create, snippets of code. Once you get them working, you move on to the next cell and then to the next cell. And as a beginner, it's a really, useful way to kind of create those small building blocks to build a larger piece of code. And then once you get better at it, then you can start doing things like functions and classes and things like that. But so what other shortcuts were there? So we talked about the Shift Enter. The Control Enter just runs the cell. The Alt Enter runs it and creates a new one always. If you do hit Alt Enter. The Control F9 will run everything. I'm not going to run that, but if you do that, it's usually for, you've downloaded someone else's notebook and you want to use it, you can just go ahead and run all the cells. And so if they've got everything, all their code, working properly, it will go ahead and run, which is very useful. So now that I'm in, I do want to take a little time to kind of describe the various items here. So these cells are cells. You can delete these cells. You can take a cell, you can move it up. So, if you kind of realize that you've written your code out of order and you're building them in small blocks, you can actually move one above the other. Also, too, using the shortcuts, you can create cells above and below with a shortcut. And so I want to talk about the primary command sequence that you need to run, which is Control plus M at the same time. So if I were to hit Control M and then D, it deletes that cell. And the key there, though, is it's Control and M at the same time, and then it's just D alone. So if I want to create one below it, Control M and then B. I've seen a lot of websites out there that will actually say something along the lines of like Control plus M plus B, and I was doing that, and I was sitting there like, why isn't this working? It's because there's a sequence to it. Control M is your command sequence, and then after that, you actually run the shortcut. And talking about shortcuts, really there is basically one shortcut to rule them all. If you can just remember this one shortcut, just remember this one, Control M and then H. So Control M at the same time, then H brings up the command palette. And then you can see all the shortcuts. Even they have Control Alt plus M. Well, actually, when it's this Control Alt plus M, that is a true statement. But yeah, here you go. You can see pin aversion is Control M and then S. So just look out for that. When it says Control M and then F like that, it means Control and M at the same time and then F. So yeah, I would say the main ones that I use every single day are Alt Enter, Control Enter to run the cells, and then create ones above and below. So Control M B for below, Control M, and then A for above. Another one that I use quite a bit is that you can enter Markdown in here, so you can change the cell to text. So if you hit Control M and then M again, you can see now that it says double click to enter. If we go ahead and double click in there, we can now actually use Markdown. And so this will actually create a title. I will leave a shortcut in the video below that will give you the shortcut, essentially the guide. And so there's a guide that shows you all the different markdowns. Basically, what it does is it takes text and then turns it into HTML for you. So you don't have to write HTML, yet you get the really good looking, and it is a minimal set of features, but you get things like bullets, bold, italicized, underlined, things like that. So sub bullet, or actually, this is a bullet. If you were to do tab and that, I believe that this one is a, oh, yep, there we go. Bold. This is bold. You're bold, sir. Once again, we hit Shift Enter and it'll run that. And now we've got a title. And we have bullets and so forth, which we come over here. It also creates sections. So now you can imagine that if you're something like a data scientist and you're trying to tell a story, you can actually break your code up in sections, describe the process that you used to get your, results, and then output your results, both print them out, but as well as like visualize them using charts. The big charts for Colab and Jupyter Notebooks are Matplotlib is probably the biggest one, but it also is the most limited. Then I would say a really good go-to Seaborn. That one is slightly better than Matplotlib, but the one that I really like a lot and I use very often is I use Plotly. But all three of those are, probably videos on their own. So if you're interested in, put the comments below and just say, hey, I'm interested in Plotly's, or I'm interested, even some other ones like Pandas, which are all various data science tools. But today we're just kind of introducing Google Colab. All right, so what else does it have? It has support for magic commands. So these are, very special, like just special commands that run in the cells. Here you can see, IPython read the docs. It's got all the magics there. And by the way, these are all, because of Jupyter is built on top of IPython, these are actually IPython magic commands. But if we go ahead and we go into one of these cells here, and we hit the %environment, it will show us all of our environment variables. All right, so you can also use the debug. So it does take a little bit of familiarity with debug, but you can run the help command, which I'll show you in this one. But whenever you have an exception, you can run the %debug and it will stop on that exception. So let's go ahead and hit Control Enter on this because we know we're going to get an error because we're trying to divide a number by 0. So basically, of course, we get this error and it shows us exactly where error is at. We can go ahead and now print these variables to determine what they are if we didn't already know, which, of course we do. Ooh, hey, print 0. Enter. If you want to know what commands you have available here, you can type help. Those show you all the different commands, but we obviously know what the error is, so we can just exit out. But it's got debugger. What else does it have? The better debugger, I personally think, is the %pdb. Actually, I think the IPDB is the better one, but that's another day. So another one you can do is the load code. I'm not technically going to really run through these, but you can do the load code. It will load them and then run it. So you can use that. What you need to do there is just point it to a file. So if you have a a local file. And speaking of local file, you do have, in fact, a local file system, which you can do by, let's see here, go into here, and then you can see that it's putting you in a little bit of a environment here where it's giving you a little bit of sample data, which is very nice of them. So other ways to look at the data, to see what you have there is you can run bash commands. Colab is essentially run on top of Unix operating system. So you have access to those commands by using the bang. So let's go ahead and run that. Oh, oops. So we type bang ls. I think this is probably a good time too to talk about sometimes you get hangups. So what you got to do is restart the kernel. So what you can do is just go to runtime, restart runtime, which is also a shortcut. We hit restart runtime and we get the little restarting right here. So now it's restarting our kernel. Do note that once it restarts your kernel, it's going to wipe out all your variables. So you are going to have to rerun all those. If you do print A, there is no longer a print A. So all right, so back to running bash commands, you can hit bang ls, and that will show you the sample data that you have. You could also just do /sample data. Oh, and one of the things that's nice as well is it is an IDE, so it does autocomplete for you. So which is very nice. You can just hit tab, control enter, and there's our files there. We can type, let's do ans autocomplete, but now let's do cat. Hopefully this file's not that big. Not too bad. All right, so what else we got on the menu here? Another way to run bash commands is %bash, but then once you run that, you're telling it that you are now in the bash environment, and it'll start running bash commands, so it's really good for multiple bash commands. So let's go ahead and do that. We have our %bash. Now let's do a ls, and an ls tag alh. What else could we do? ps tag elf. There we go. So there's our first ls, then our lsaf, and then our ps. So it ran all those commands. So the %bash, there are other % commands. I'm not familiar with those right off the top of my head, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and leave those in a link in the video description below. All right, so there's also the ability to install third-party packages. The easiest way to really do it is pip install, because now that we have access to the bash, we can just use pip install pandas. Do note too that when your notebook expires, you are going to have to reinstall pandas. And depending on the module you install, sometimes you do need to restart the kernel. So just keep that in mind. If you believe something should in fact work right after a pip install, you might want to just restart the kernel. There's also IPydeps. Personally, I prefer IPydeps. One of the things that we do when we leverage Jupyter Notebooks is we always ensure that IPyDeps is already installed. So then in your code, you can import IDeps. And what that allows us to do is essentially, Python notebook sharing. So you can just give it to another user. It will automatically install those. What's really nice too is if it will do a check to see if it already exists. If it exists, then it will just tell you, hey, already exists. It won't actually try to reinstall something that's already there. It just does a check. Here's the visualization. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and, run this link here. So let's go ahead and do that. Seaborn. Introduction. Yeah, let's just do an introduction. Use their code here. They have Colab already has Seaboard installed because it is just that popular of a um, visualization module. And we'll hit Control Enter, and we'll get it pulls the data here, and then it does the plot here. That was actually another really fun thing with Seaborn, is that it actually has various data sets that you can just pull and play around with. So now you have a nice chart. Right, so I already talked a little bit about the Markdown. You can hit the Control MM, and then you can use various shortcuts for headers, unordered lists, bold. As I mentioned, you can hit this cheat sheet here, and it will show you all the various ones, which I'll go ahead and open. Why not? So we have headings. You can see that you can each pound sign that you add, your heading gets smaller. The heading 1 can be pretty big and a little overbearing. We have bold, italicized, block quotes. We have ordered lists as well as unordered lists. You can also import code directly into it. And that's what we did right here. One of the things that was pretty neat is it actually shows you what it's going to look like. So you've got on the left-hand side, you have the actual text, and then you have to the right side how it's converted into HTML for the Markdown. All right, well, that's all I have for Jupyter, or for Google Colab, which is built on top of Jupyter Notebooks. I hope you enjoyed this, and that's it. Bye.